Good morning. Today is Sunday, August 27, 2023. What happens for us in synagogue is prayer, Torah study, creating and deepening community, and we also express the rhythm of our Jewish lives in many, many ways. One expression of this is the choice of Haftorah, the passage from the prophets that is read in the synagogue every Shabbos. And there is a rhythm in the way that early in the summer, there are 3 weeks leading up to Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, 3 weeks where the choice of the Haftorah is the subject of Puranios, which means the indictment, the bad tidings coming to the Jews, foretelling the destruction of the temple. And that leads to Tisha B'Av that commemorates the destruction of the first temple and the second temple and other terrible things that happen. And those 3 weeks of Puranios, of misfortunes and catastrophes, is followed by Shiva de Nechemta, 7 weeks of Nechama, of consolation and comfort that lead to Rosh Hashanah. So the Haftorah, starting immediately after Tisha B'Av, has this drastically changed mood of comfort, consolation, resolution from after Tisha B'Av ends until Rosh Hashanah. For example, yesterday in the synagogue, we read the beautiful, uplifting passage in the prophet Isaiah Yeshayahu, chapter 54. Berega katana zavtich, God says to the Jewish people through the prophet, maybe it is true that for a single moment I forsook you, I was angry with you, but barachamim gedolim akabsech, but with abundant mercy and with great compassion I will gather you to me. Yes, it's true that there are bumps in the relationship that we have with God from time to time, but the overwhelming, overarching emotion is one of gathering together with great and abundant mercy and kindness. Now that is on a national scale. What is the equivalent for an individual? We've been discussing the process of mourning, observing Shiva, saying Kaddish, all the other practices that we've been discussing, the actions, the emotions. What is the goal of all these rules? We use the word Nechama. We hope that a person at the end will have Nechama, which we sometimes translate, and the translations are inadequate, comfort, consolation. But what does that look like? Where does Jewish law and Jewish custom help us arrive? So I want to share with you 2 basic insights from a wonderful work titled Consolation, written by Rabbi Maurice Lamm. It is a very, very important book. And for anyone, I recommend it highly to anyone, but certainly a person who is going through or who has gone through a loss of a loved one. I recommend this work very highly, Rabbi Maurice Lamm, Consolation. And he explains that this process that we hope leads to this goal of Nechama means that the practices, the stages of 7 days and 30 days and 11 months and 12 months, all of this should guide us through a journey of gradual emotional recovery, leading at least to the feeling that life goes on, that we have a functional recovery, that we have eventually feelings of hopefulness, planning for the future, a reblossoming of life. Now, There's a different speed for everyone. The stages, the time periods are just guides, but each person at their own pace. And that means that this process will bring us to a place where we retain the memories of the person that passed away, and we retain the sadness of their passing. And there will be emotional times on occasion. For example, when we come to the synagogue to say Yizkar, the memorial prayer, on the yard site, the anniversary of the person's death, where we remember them, we may be very sad and still shed tears even years later. Certainly at future life cycle events, which are so important in the life of the family, and for that person to be missing, it is poignant and it can be very dramatic and tearful. But on a daily basis, these feelings do not interfere with life. Going through the practices and the stages of mourning in accordance with Jewish law and Jewish customs helps us to reach this in a gradual manner. And that's the first level we hope to get to, this functional recovery. But there's a deeper level. A level that leads us to transcendence, to be able to grow into a new person. Now, we see this process work out in a very subtle but deep and beautiful way in the Torah, in Bereshis, in the Parsha of Sara. And it's also one of the first times that this word Nechama is used in the Torah. We learn that our matriarch Sara dies, and Avraham, her bereaved husband, buries her, eulogizes her. And one can only imagine the grief of Avraham and his son Yitzchak, Isaac, who are left without their mother, their wife. And then Avraham engages in a process to find a mate, a wife for Yitzchak. And that woman is Rebecca. And Rebecca finally comes, and she and Yitzchak meet each other. And they decide to marry. And the Torah says, Vayivieha Yitzchak ha'ola Sara imo. Yitzchak, when he married Rivka, brought her in to live in the tent of Sara, his mother. His mother's tent had been empty since she passed away. But now Rivka would inhabit this tent. Vayikaches Rivka vatihila liisha. And Rivka and Yitzchak married each other. Vaye'ehaveha, and he loved her. Yitzchak loved Rivka. Vayinachem Yitzchak acharei imo. And then Yitzchak was able to achieve Nechama, comfort, consolation, but we're going to see it means much more after the death of his mother. Now, the order of those words is very precise. And the Ramban Nachmanides comments on the order, and Rabbi Lamm in his work explains this. First, Yitzchak places Rivka in his mother's tent, in the tent of Sara. Putting Rivka in Sarah's place does not bring Nechama, because you can't replace a loss of one loved one. You can't replace that loss with another person. The loss of a loved one never goes away. But it's only after the Torah says, Vaye'ehaveha, and Yitzchak loved Rivka. After Yitzchak poured his energy into loving this woman, Rivka, with whom he would fulfill his destiny. Only then, as a new person, as a person who has transcended his previous character, only then is there resolution. Vayinochem acharei Sara imo. He was comforted. He was made into a new person. He transcended the old person that he was. When something tragic happens, someone we love passes away, we all ask the same question. And the question is posed by David HaMelech, King David in Tehillim. Keli, Keli, lama azavtani. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why did this happen to me? Why did this wonderful person pass away? We all ask that question. And we all get stuck because in this world, we are not given by God an answer to that question. We will never know an answer to the why. But listen carefully to what Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch does with this verse. Just a change in the vowels. Keli, Keli, my God, lama azavtani. Lama means why. Why have you forsaken me? Why has this terrible thing happened? Rav Hirsch teaches us we have to read it changing the vowels. Keli, Keli, my God, lama azavtani. For what purpose have you done this to me? To what end has this happened to me? How am I supposed to grow from this terrible tragedy that has befallen me? That's the question that we need to ask and answer, because that is what the process of Nechama should be. I've told this story before. When I was sitting Shiva for my father, of blessed memory, we were sitting Shiva in New York, my family. That's where my father was living when he passed away. And one of my oldest friends came to visit us. She and I were in school together from kindergarten. Our families were close and knew each other well. Her father, a wonderful man, had passed away years earlier. In fact, this friend is the one who introduced me to my wife. And she said to me, as we sat in the Shiva house, she said to me, which mitzvah have you selected by which to honor your father's memory? And I was startled because it was the day after my father's funeral. And I told her, how can I think about what mitzvah I'm going to do in the future? I'm still in shock. And she said to me, but this is the time. This is the moment right away that you need to start thinking about this. And of course, she was right. Because there is an energy in grieving. And like any force, it needs to go somewhere. It needs an outlet. It could flow into something negative. Depression, anger, loneliness, or what we hope for, lema, keli, lema azavtani. For what purpose has this happen to me. And that will allow me to think constructively, to divert that energy of grieving into something positive, something constructive. Shiva is the time to start thinking about that. And the stages of mourning will help to nurture that plan so that we can end up creating a living memorial, an action, a mitzvah, a project, some way in which we are constructively honoring the memory of the person that passed away. Because when we do that, that's where all of that energy goes. It's diverted into a positive purpose, and we become a different person. This was one of the deepest and truest lessons I learned when my father died. And I followed my friend's advice. And I did think to myself privately of some mitzvah that I would take upon myself that I felt connected me more strongly to my father, reflected his values. And as I did it, it meant, and it continues to mean, a great deal to me. And it's not necessary for me to share what that is, only that there was a constructive outlet for the pain and the grief and the loss that I felt. Getting over the loss is not Nechama, because that will not happen. I've shared with you before lines from a wonderful novel I recently read titled The Winners by Frederik Backman. And in one section, in the aftermath of a tragic death, he writes, "And eventually, enough time has passed for it to hurt only almost all the time. Hug without crying all the time. Laugh without always feeling guilty." But true, deep Nechama is growth. Another remarkable book I recommend to you. The title is Between Two Kingdoms, a memoir of a life interrupted, written by Suleika Jaouad. Between Two Kingdoms. It's a remarkable work. And she writes, "Healing is figuring out how to coexist with the pain that will always live inside of you, without pretending it isn't there, or allowing it to hijack your day. Recovery isn't a gentle self-care spree that restores you to a pre-illness state. Recovery is not about salvaging the old at all. It's about accepting that you must forsake a familiar self forever in favor of one that is being newly born. It is an act of brute, terrifying discovery. And that discovery is Nechama. May it happen for everyone who suffers a loss. And may it happen for all of us, the Jewish people, by the time Rosh Hashanah arrives. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you all soon in person.